Good evening, everyone. I am Joe Barnes, and along with Laura Dorfman, our co-chairs of the CPC meeting, the CPC committee. This is the February 21st meeting. I would confirm first, all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present, can hear me. Members, please, when I call your name, respond in the affirmative. Maureen Callahan.
Here.
Reg Foster.
Present.
Jim Rosenbaum.
Yeah, here sort of.
Okay. Dave Hera.
Here.
Gene McKnight.
Here.
Paul Dawson.
I may not have, I may need to promote Paul.
Okay. Keith LaFace.
Yeah.
Laura Dorfman.
Here.
Our administrative team. Tonight, we have Lauren Spinney, our administrative coordinator. Cecilia will not be joining us. Is that correct?
Cecilia, I believe no.
Okay,
I don't see Paul Dawson on the attendees list.
okay. All right. For this meeting, CPC is convening a live and Zoom meeting. It's posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. Please remember that this meeting is being recorded. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website. We will ask each member of the committee to please raise your hand or get the chair's attention prior to making a comment. Remember that the listening public is available as part of this Zoom meeting. Be advised that any comment or statement will be recorded and available to all attending. So, having said that, our first item on the agenda is the chair's introduction and updates. Well, the update is that we just met with the finance committee. I think it's fair to say they're supportive of the three articles. There are some questions that were raised about Linden Chambers that we will get answers to or find someone who can provide the answers, but they are supportive very much for the project, as I think most people are. Laura, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I think it just, like Joe said, there's some follow-up questions, which is to be expected.
Yeah.
It's a lot, but. And Lauren, you're gonna help us with those answers, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Is Emily joining us here?
Emily is here.
Okay.
Um,
The first item on the agenda is Emily Achtenberg will provide a little presentation, answering some questions that have been posed, along with the conditions. She had some, 5 questions or 5 comments that she was going to be addressing, one of them being loan conditions. So Emily, are you there?
Do I need to?
Oh, I was muted. That's the problem. Now.
Okay.
can you
There we
speak
go.
now? Okay. Okay, how much time do you want me to take, Joe?
Well, you don't have to spend the entire evening, but I think if you could address the handout that you provided to us on the loan conditions,
On
and
the
I think,
condition,
yeah, please.
do you want me to give a little background before that? I'm just gonna
Yeah.
get into, yeah, all right. So I've been sort of poking and prodding at this project for the few months now that I've been involved, and I think it's a very good project. Will have a lot of benefits for the town, which have all been described to you by the Housing Authority. I've had a bunch of questions which have mostly been answered. And I guess, I was gonna kind of walk through, highlight a little bit the pro forma comparison that I did for you, but I'll say first that The one issue that is still somewhat troublesome, just so that we have it in our minds, is the, this was addressed in the responses that the NHA sent to us on January 24th of this year. There were responses to the questions that I had raised. And it's the first one that has to do with one of the major sources for this project, which is a sponsor loan from the NHA to the project at $6.8 million, which is coming from the proposed sale and rehab of another project. This is the Seabeds Cook project. The issue there, as I've tried to highlight, is that it's this proposed Seabed Cook. Is it Seabeds Cook or Seabed Cooks? I keep getting that wrong.
Seabed Cook.
Seabeds Cook, okay. This project itself needs substantial financial assistance and support from the state. In some of the same nature that the Linden Street project does. It needs tax credits and tax exempt bonds, which is a bigger deal today than it used to be because there's a great scarcity of tax exempt bonds. So this, and in the response to the questions that they provided, NHA gave us on the last page a little summary pro forma of the Seabeds and Cook project, and you'll see there that it's a pretty substantial project in and of itself. Its total source, the project, as I understand it, has 76 units, and the total sources being 54 million. It's about, the total development costs are about 723,000 a unit, so actually more than are currently projected for this one. In part, that's because it has a high acquisition price, and that's where the link comes in to Linden Street. There's actually two links that I'll explain in a minute. So what you see here is sources and uses. One of the uses is acquisition, which means that there's going to be a sale of this property to another developer. And I'm not sure if that's going to be CHA. I think it possibly is, or maybe that hasn't been decided yet. CHA, perhaps in conjunction with NHA, I'm not exactly sure. But that's necessary in order for it to get tax credits. There has to be a change of ownership and tax exempt bonds. So there will be an actual sales price for this project of 18.1 million. But then the seller, which is NHA, is going to take back a seller note, which is that on the other side source is called NHA acquisition loan. So the difference between those two, the 18.1 and the 11.25 million is 6.8 million. So the seller, NHA, will be able to realize from this transaction $6.8 million, and that is the amount that is going into Linden Street. So in order for Linden Street to happen, this project has to happen, and it has to happen first, or at least simultaneously with Linden Street, because it's giving $6.8 million to Linden Street. I have asked for some support for the idea that there could be a 18.1 million acquisition price for this project based on a market analysis. I haven't seen that yet, but I expect that we will get it. But the concern, so I was saying that there are actually two links. This is one of them. The other one, which is equally important, is that because of the way this project is being restructured, it will be able to release 60 units of project-based Section 8 from its restructuring of its subsidy. And those 60 units are also going over to to Linden Street and will become part of the package that is needed for the Linden redevelopment, 60 units of Section 8 subsidy. So it's linked at the hip with Linden Street. And my only concern is that it's hard to get one project funded. It's doubly hard to get two. And this is just to say it's an extra hurdle, which might necessitate some other conditions that we put on it in terms of the timing and expectation. It's a great idea to have one project subsidize the other, excuse me, if it works. And it's also putting the Linden Street project at a bit of a risk, because if it doesn't work, then that whole project falls apart. So it's a big ask of the state to be putting in two projects at the same time for a fairly substantial amount of resources. Though, just to be clear, this Seabeds Cook does not require all the soft debt that Linden does, but it does require the guts, the taxes and bonds and tax credits. And as I said before, we're right now in a state which is pretty unprecedented for Massachusetts, which is we have literally run out of tax and bonding volume cap for the next like 2 years. They're saying that there's already a queue in line. It's kind of an amorphous queue. It's not like anyone knows for sure if they're in it, but if projects under discussion with the various bonding agencies, there's a line right now that long. And there could be some federal legislation. We are hoping for that will broaden the pot. That would be the real way out of this dilemma, hopefully. But it is a concern. So with that said, I could just spend a couple of minutes highlighting some things about the pro forma. Just this is the way that I analyze projects, so I'm just kind of sharing that perspective with you. I did hand out, maybe that's been distributed, right, Lauren?
It has, but I was wondering if you'd like me to display it on the screen. I can share.
That would be great. Yeah,
Yep.
that would be great.
So just let me know which page you're going to
Yeah,
start.
so we'll start with the first page. Yeah. So I did a comparison. It's not that significant, but it's interesting. This other property in Salem, Leaford Terrace, which is about to close any day now, that I've been working on very intimately. So it's a similar size property. It's going to be 124 units, and Linden Street is going to be 136, and has a lot of similar characteristics. So I'm just sort of keeping that in the background as a comparison. It's not that it's a required comparison, but it's sort of instructive. So the key takeaways on this first page: Linden Street, the key difference between Linden and Leaford is that Leaford has, for all of its units, all 124 that it's going to be, a project-based Section 8 subsidy that comes with a market rent. So you can see in that first group, LHA, it has 108 units coming directly from the housing authority that have rents way up there. Whereas Linden Street only has 12 of those, and that's simply a matter of that the housing authority doesn't have them. In Salem, the housing authority was in the fortunate position that they had left over a lot of Section 8 subsidy that could become project-based, so they were able to contribute it. So the only units at Linden that come with those high rents are the 12 that the housing authority is contributing, and the 24 that are proposed to be coming from HLC a few lines down. The bulk of them, the 100, are these Faircloth Section 8 project-based units, of which 60 are coming from Seabeds Cook, as we discussed, and 40 are coming from the Cambridge Housing Authority. And those are project-based subsidy, but they come at rents which are like less than half, as you can see, the $12.50. So what that means is that the property doesn't have the rental income to support a large mortgage as it does at Salem, and that means it has to get funding from somewhere else. So you can go to the next page really quickly. Just to say on the income expense side, if you scroll down, Lauren, as we pass property taxes somewhere in there, yeah, real estate tax, I just want to note for you that Linden Street is proposing a substantial reduction, if not a complete elimination, of the property tax in favor of just having a pilot agreement according to the same principles that the property's been operating on so far. And I just bring that to your attention because that's something that has to be approved by your assessing department, and I assume by the town overall as well, by the selectmen, because it's a cost and it's a contribution really of the town that's important to make this project work. You can see that the operating expenses per unit for both of these properties is pretty similar. It's around 11 something for Salem and 10.5 for Linden. Salem, by the way, it also began as an elderly property. Historically, it's been an elderly property with 50 units. And in this case, it is being converted to an intergenerational project. We didn't look at the first page, but if you went back, you'd see it's got a substantial number of 2 and 3 bedroom units. In fact, it's about 50% staying 1 bedrooms and 50% family. And that's something that HLC, yeah, you can see the unit mix down at the bottom there of that page. It was originally 51 bedrooms and now it's going to be 50-50, 1 bedrooms and family units. That's something that HLC was very enthusiastic about, and it has helped to shape some of the thinking about the future that I've reflected in the loan conditions that I'm suggesting. So, okay, then if you go on to sources and uses, which would be some tab later. Yeah.
This one?
Yep. So you can see that the construction costs are pretty similar. Salem again is higher, and that project is close to closing. So more than likely we can expect the Linden Street costs to go up as well, but they're pretty similar. And then keep going down to the total development costs. Yeah. Again, Salem is higher, 758. These numbers are so shocking still. 758,000 a unit, and then a little over 600 is, so they're definitely in line. What I was talking about before, now we're getting to sources, the difference, Salem with the higher rents is able to support a mortgage of about 237,000 a unit, whereas Linden Street, it's really half of that. So that's a big, it's a big constraint for financing, because it means that all that funding has to be made up somewhere else, not from the debt. So I sort of broke the sources down into different chunks, the equity, which is the federal low-income housing tax credits. And then if you go to the next page, Lauren, state tax credits, that's a place where potentially more could be gotten from the state. That will remain to be seen. The state has a rule in the QAP that a project of this size can't have an allocation of more than $1 million, but people seem to be getting more, and Salem got quite a bit more. So that's something that can be explored. And then the soft debt, public housing funds, private housing, actually what's instructive about that, if you go down to the bottom of the page, Lauren, a couple of lines, yeah, at the very bottom, whoops, yeah. Public housing funds per original public housing unit, because that's basically how they're allocated by HLC. Those numbers are pretty similar, 155,000 for Salem per unit and 150 is what's being contemplated. Private housing funds, if we look at it per additional unit, which that's not so clear that that's the only way to look at it, but if it were the case, perhaps more could be gotten from the state. We don't know. It looks like more was gotten for Salem. Salem had the advantage of its mayor becoming the lieutenant governor in the course of the funding of this project, so that always helps. I don't know if we have a possibility of that. So if you go back up to soft debt, yeah, we looked at that. Two special pots that NHA has already secured, state ARPA and state partnership for growth are in there. So then we have, you know, the local funds, and one of the major reasons that the amount being required locally is so much larger that at Salem, again, is because of this depressed amount of debt that results from the lower rents of the subsidy programs. And so, you know, there's two big sources in this project that we didn't have in Salem, one being the 6.9 million CPA and the 6.8 million sponsor loan under other, which is that amount that's coming from Seabeds Cook that we talked about. So that's really all I want to say about the pro forma, unless anybody has questions. So we can talk about.
I have a question, Emily, it's Laura.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Sure.
When you talk about the interest rate on the first page, you've got an interest rate. So do you think that 6% rate is realistic? Going
You
forward
know,
into, I mean, I know it's hard to guess, but
it's really hard to say. I mean, who knows? I think it's as reasonable a guess as you could make right now as any. Lee Ford is closing with a little bit higher. I think rates are expected to come down a bit pretty soon, but this project is a couple of years away from closing. So who knows? You know,
I only ask is the debt service coverage you already have is too low.
Oh, that was my comment. Well, I asked CHA and NHA to give examples of projects that they have closed with 1.10 debt coverage, and they did have a couple. I think it's low only in the sense that it's not usually accepted. It's often not accepted by a lender and especially an investor.
Right.
But they point out that they have 100% project-based subsidy. So that does give more security and takes away some of the risk. And they've been able to do it. Whether it will end up being that way, I don't know. I think, you know, it's unusual for it to be that low. So
should it be like sort of stressed to see? Because obviously the rate's going to impact the coverage ratio, right? Like, should we? I don't know.
I think that all this means is that it's likely that these costs are going to go up and they're going to need, you know, if the debt coverage goes up, then the amount of mortgage will be lower. So that means there's going to have to be more money from somewhere else. And so, for example, when I said that possibly the ask for state credits is low, you know,
maybe
that's going to be a place where maybe they can get more money to make up some of these gaps. I mean, this is still very early stage of the project. It's really difficult to be accurate anywhere near at this point, but you try to leave yourself some margin, you know, and maybe the state tax credits and maybe even the private housing funds could be increased, and will need to be.
Thank you.
Emily, this project, as you would be the first to point out, has a lot of moving parts. And there's a lot of what ifs and is there a time frame that we would have a better idea as to whether this can go forward or not? I guess it would depend on what the time frame is on the funding cycle, but do you have an idea as to when this will start to come more and more to to a head?
Well, I think, as NHA's explained, there's a sequence of events that has to occur. They have to apply in the fall for, put in a pre-app in October to be considered for the round, which will be in January for all the private housing money. And in order to do that, they have to have the local commitments lined up. So you are being asked, to put up funds at a time when things are not super certain. But your funding is not at risk. It's just the opportunity cost of not being able to fund another project. But unfortunately, for better or worse, this is the way the system works, is that you have to line up your local funds and all your local approvals before you can go in for the state money. And, if the worst came to worst and the project wasn't funded, then you wouldn't be honoring the commitment. But I think that, so the timing seems right to me. The public housing funds, I thought were gonna be available a little earlier, sort of out of cycle, but it sounds like they're tying that, because it used to be that you could get the public housing funds committed before earlier, and that would be like a signal that HLC was on your side. Once they put in the public housing funds, it's a pretty good chance that they're going to get you the rest. But now it seems to be that they're tying them more closely to the cycle of the competitive funding rounds. So that's all going to happen, in the same cycle.
Okay, thank you.
So we can talk about the loan conditions that I was thinking about. Maybe you could put those up, Lauren. So this really comes out of my experience with lots of other projects, and then some peculiarities of this one as they've evolved. I think it's really important to put affordability restrictions on your funds, for a number of reasons that I can explain. There will be other affordability restrictions coming from other sources. They are all variable. The tax credit restrictions will speak to the affordability of the units at the top that are all going to be tax credit units, but the tax credit units go away if there's a foreclosure, tax credit restriction, sorry. And that's important to know. I mean, this is very unlikely to happen, but if you are looking for permanent affordability for the amount of money that you're putting in, which many towns feel is a really important quid pro quo, you need to put your own restrictions on. The HLC will have restrictions that are tied to the disposition of the property. These days, HLC is really backing off restrictions for public housing units because they want to get rid of the public housing, and that's ironically one of the reasons why this project will be high priority for funding, if it is because it's getting rid of the state's obligation to take care of these public housing units, funding wise and otherwise. So the state can't really be counted on in terms of the affordability restrictions, and there'll be potentially others. I don't know. I guess the other thing that occurred to me, this is not going to be a 40B, or is it? Because that's a question, whether it is going to need other, apart from the zoning change itself that's happening to facilitate the project. Is there going to be a need for a 40B to get other zoning changes? I don't think so.
Yes, please. Jean has an answer here.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
serve on the planning board, and we have developed zoning for the property. That will be by right zoning for the multifamily development that's proposed, and with certain setbacks and so forth, that everything has been worked out. that will work for the project. And that will be going before the, annual town meeting. And there'll be hearing on it over the next few months. But I believe it's already, been sent to the select board by the planning board. And, there's no need whatsoever for, operating under, chapter 40B.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. So I
Mhm.
only bring that up because where a project is 40B, there are required affordability restrictions that come along with that as again, a quid pro quo. And also that will precede foreclosure, that will last in the event of foreclosure, they will supersede. But you don't have any of that here. So I would recommend that you put affordability restrictions on the property in exchange for the CPC funding. Actually, I think some of it is required that at some level, but you can exceed that level. There is a required affordability restriction up to some level that I'm not sure what it is. Might be 100% of median, or at least 80. But my suggestion, so it has three parts, is that you restrict all 136 units as they are proposed, that they be available to households with incomes below 60% of AMI. That is the tax credit restriction. And it's really just saying to keep the tax credit restriction effectively on the property in perpetuity. And then the parenthetical in here was just because I did hear NHA say at one point, or CHA, that they might be considering, excuse me, for this project, a different approach to affordability, which is called income averaging, which allows you to bring in some units at 80% if you have more units at the very low end. And to give that flexibility, that will show up in the tax credit regulatory agreement. So there might be, 20% of the units might be at 80%, but then another 20% would be at 30% of AMI, something like that. And whatever the restrictions are in the tax credit regulatory agreement, that those be reflected in your restriction in perpetuity.
Mr. Chair.
Reg's hand is raised, so I'm wondered you.
Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer as a point of information, and I can turn this back over to Jean because I think her hand went up at the same time. But the planning board actually extensively considered the question of affordability, the deed restrictions on the land that was gifted that created the original Linden Chambers, development, was all deed restricted to be affordable, and the planning board chose to continue that in the current warrant articles that have been approved by the select board and the planning board for the warrant, and considered various different ways that it could be restricted to affordable. And the planning board, and Jean can explain this more, chose to conform it to our town definition and already in our town bylaw of affordable as the best approach for the town.
Which is what? The definition.
It's 80% of area median income.
So I would argue that,
I didn't remember that specifically, Reg. I knew that the zoning had restrictions on affordability for all of the units. But I didn't quite remember what factor was being used, but if it's the same as the other factor in the zoning in our town, I believe it's 80% of median.
It's the same. There was a discussion at the planning board of whether we wanted to, or not we, but when the planning board wanted to introduce a different, more nuanced or different definition of affordable housing, and after considering the alternatives, chose to use the definition that's already been in the town bylaw for many years, apparently.
Yes.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, I just had one quick question. Are we talking about the loan conditions or the grant conditions?
Grant.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
There's no loan.
I don't,
Well, Emily's document was titled proposed loan conditions,
That was
but they could be
before.
conditions that could be applied.
Yeah, that was before we met with, Dave Davidson.
So, I mean, obviously, this is up to you. I would argue this is public housing. This is a resource that has always been for very low income families, really. I don't know, but Reg could tell you the average income today is probably less than 30% of AMI. If you go to 80, you're making a big leap as to who would be served potentially in the future by this development. I think, you know, we know that it's affordable at 60%, it's feasible at 60% because those are the assumptions that are in there now. And I would argue that it's in the interest of the town to keep this project as much as possible geared towards the occupancy that it's historically had, which is different from what affordability might mean in the rest of the town. And 60% is a long way from what it is today as well. And I had some other suggestions in here too about further ways that you could protect the affordability. So I have to say something about, you know, where I come from on this. I have a very biased perspective on this subject. I've spent my entire career working with so-called expiring use properties, subsidized housing that comes to the end of its affordability life at year 40 or sometimes year 20, and struggling to make sure that those properties continue to be affordable, which is, you know, just a huge challenge. And I think the one lesson that we've all learned from the expiring use experience is that we want to try to build in upfront as much protection for permanent affordability as we can. And it's just you know, it was a missed opportunity over the decades, and trying to redress it now. And you have to look at what, you know, what's the level of affordability that makes sense in the historic context of what kind of resource the property has been before. In my view, it's obviously up to you.
Do we know what the average income of the residents is there now?
You can ask, well, Reg is the best one to
Reg?
answer.
Reg, do you know that, Reg?
Yeah, all right, I know that our average rent is basically of the present residents is about $375 to $400 a month, which if you do the math at a 30%, you know, Emily's point is correct. In other words, our current residents are
What income
we call
level
it deeply affordable for a reason, as you know.
So below, would they be 30%?
It'd be like 12,000 a year or something.
AMI?
Yeah.
So, and
Well-
then, of course, you have to look at it in Needham as we are extraordinarily high in our AMI, even within our area where we're, you know, as a little kind of oasis of extra high AMI here. So, again, the point is well taken. You know, but on the other hand, you know, the question is it who's making those decisions on an ongoing basis over the years? And that's the Needham Housing Authority and what we do with our properties here. Our goal and our mission has always been to have deeply affordable housing.
Which is what? Reg? Is that below 50%?
Yeah, 30%. 30% or below.
Thank you.
30% of AMI.
AMI, which is probably what, $40,000 for
You know,
family of four-ish, Reg? I'm guessing.
Yeah, but I also would point out that we have Margaret Moran here who's listening in, and you know I'm not qualified to
No, we don't
this
have to go down
discussion
that
much
track.
further
No,
with
no.
Emily,
It's
who's
okay.
obviously been in this area for a great
Yeah.
deal of time here.
No, just, we don't have to go deeper into that, just.
And I just also would point out that, you know, one of our challenges is I wish we had a person who was going to be lieutenant governor as part of the town of Needham who could like get the deal that they had in the Salem Housing Authority, which is, I'm not sure that's completely fair for us to be compared to this. We're trying to work with what we have. And right now we have 100 of those really deeply, skinny subsidies, I think is the term, right, Emily? Which is that she pointed out at the beginning here. And so we have to recognize that, we have to kind of put together, we have to work with the hand of cards that we've been dealt and not
Understood.
necessarily something else here.
Okay,
Understood.
Dave?
Right, but just to be clear, the 60% AMI level is tax credit level. I mean, you could satisfy that requirement by just having people come in at 60% of AMI, all of them, in a worst case. That would be a far cry from where it is today. But at 60% of AMI, they don't necessarily need operating subsidy. We wouldn't like that, but that's a feasible situation.
But that's not our mission, Emily. It really isn't. Our
course.
mission is to serve, much lower than that.
Right,
Yeah.
but we're discussing now, I mean, I think what I was speaking to was the town has planning board or selectmen, I guess both have already set a standard at 80%. And I'm suggesting that it should be 60% or whatever range is reflected ultimately in your tax credit regulatory agreement is what we should go with as the overall, ceiling for this project.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave Harris?
No, my question, simple question. We're talking on one hand about a restriction on the grant. On the other hand, about a zoning
Two
restriction.
different things, right?
But there's a third thing, which is the Needham Housing Authority and, what their policy is and how they're gonna conduct, their operations.
And
Which Reg has said has always been deeply affordable. So my question is, with these other restrictions, I mean, that's really not gonna change how Needham Housing Authority is running their business, is it?
So.
I mean,
Can I speak to that? I think it's a hard thing because this is a real what if. You have to put your mind into a place where you don't want to go. I mean, this is a restriction on the land, which means that down the road, if there were a foreclosure, say, of the property, what would be left in terms of how it would have to be developed, either by Needham Housing Authority or some other owner? Could it just go to market rate housing? No. So the point is, though, what would it be? What would be the restrictions that would affect the next buyer? Or in the case of, refinancing 40 or 50 years from now, which most of these properties will need, what would be the terms under which Needham Housing Authority would have to restructure it? And if you put restrictions on the land, then the owner has to operate within those terms, and anybody they sell to has to follow the same rules. So you're putting in restrictions that are long-term insurance to guide the future development and operation of this property for 99 years.
Emily, is there also a deed restriction in terms of price increase? Sometimes you see with affordable units, the property can never be worth more than 1.5% increase per year. Or,
Where we see that is mostly for home ownership units,
okay,
where in this case, interesting idea, but I've never seen it done.
okay.
Dave?
Okay, so, on one hand, we're talking about what restrictions we should put on the grant.
Mhm.
You have the town has already weighed in on what they want as a restriction on the land,
Yes,
which I think would be the long
Well,
term thing.
but
So
this-
I'm getting a little confused about what,
So you're saying what would go in the grant if the town's already said that
No.
it's an 80%
yeah,
restriction?
and
Well,
is,
yeah, I think that
Hey.
the kinds of things that Emily listed here would be the kinds of things that would be conditions of the community preservation.
right, no, I understand that.
Yeah,
But is that
as
really,
you said.
is that, trumped by the restriction on the land?
No, Well, no, really.
can I just-
All the zoning is saying is that whoever in the future owns this land, all that it can be used for, if you're gonna go for this, is multifamily housing, where the rents are, affordable to households that are below 80% of median. And 30 years from now, will there be, will this project end and it goes to some private, developer or nonprofit kind of developer where they want to put up something like that? It's possible, but right now, we're talking about this project, this housing authority, the sources of funding that it's seeking, which have the restrictions on the income of the persons who can live there. And we can supplement that expectation with grant conditions.
Yeah, okay, so the scenario is if this project is foreclosed for whatever reason, then the condition that we place could impact, whatever the new buyer or the new owner
Yeah.
would do, right?
Right,
And if
and that's the point,
Okay,
to keep it.
yeah, if that's the case, why
Yeah.
wouldn't we keep it the way it is now? Like at 30%, why go to 60%?
Because
We can't make the
No,
project work that
Well,
we
way.
can
Em- Emily-
project work. Yeah.
May I just say, I'd like to hear the rest of the presentation, because I think this is a good discussion. And that, if the CPC thinks it's within their purview to dictate conditions, obviously they can do that as well. But there's a lot of point and counterpoint that, needs to be discussed as a follow-on here, I think.
All right, let's turn it back over to Emily.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing. These would be restrictions on the land. I mean, I wasn't aware that the planning board, that had already gone to the selectmen. I'm not sure, where this fits into the politics of affordability restrictions discussion in the town. But the CPC restrictions are on the land as well. So, the town would have to, you can have a zoning restriction that's different from the CPC land restriction, but this one the more restrictive one would govern, obviously. So I'm not sure that makes sense. The town has to probably, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't actually speak to whether there can be two different types of restrictions coming from the same entity, the town. But just to be clear, this is a land restriction coming from, the CPC restriction has to be a restriction on the land. It has to be ahead of everything else and ahead of foreclosure. So, survive foreclosure.
So you're saying that the agreement and the zoning board decision, they have to have the same income restriction?
Let me think about this for a minute. No, I don't necessarily, I'm thinking of other examples of that. In Salem, we had a 40B restriction that was zoning, and then we had a different restriction from the CPC, actually. So, maybe they don't. Maybe they can be different, but the one that's more restrictive will trump, so to speak. Sorry to use that word, the other one, because it's more restrictive.
Jean?
Yes, of course, certainly on the Community Preservation Committee, you're aware that for open space, there's a requirement if you use CPC money to acquire open space, that it has to be subject to a preservation restriction. And if the town is acquiring the land, we only have a couple of situations in town. The restriction is actually held by a private nonprofit, so it can enforce it against the town itself. There's nothing like that on giving CPC funds for community housing in the statute that requires an affordability restriction.
I don't agree with that. There actually
All
is.
right, tell me,
Yeah.
am I wrong? Please correct me.
Yeah. I'm not sure I can quote a chapter and verse, but it is, I might even have it here. Permanent restriction. I'm looking at. This is a regulation, anyway, not necessarily this section 12A of chapter 44B. It talks about bound by permanent restriction, limiting the use, to run with the land. Okay, and somewhere in here, and I'm not gonna be able to find it right now. It does.
May I please suggest again that we move to the end of the presentation? I will just state for the record that if the CPC wants to limit the tenants for the all 136 units to people with 30%, it will kill the deal and we'll never do it.
Yeah.
So that's, it's very clear if that's what the CPC wants to do. Frankly,
Well,
I think it's within the
that-
four corners of the CPC's responsibility. I think the decision as to the affordability of the property belongs with the planning board and the select board. And I would advise that we move on and we direct Emily to listen to the many hours of discussion that has been had on this subject. It's all available on YouTube, and I can certainly provide a list of YouTube meetings that so that she can focus her time very precisely on that.
Thank you. Let's let Joe just run the rest of the meeting, okay?
No, I think this is a completely, I've requested politely twice. I think that I get it. I get the point.
It's just that this.
Well,
I
we-
really,
In
I
all due
really
respect-
think
In
that
all due
we should
respect,
move
Rich,
on.
we're not necessarily directing the discussion to you. We've got 5 or 6 members here that are interested in hearing what Emily has to say as well. So we'll have her move down the list of conditions, maybe not dwell on the affordability. There are other things that maybe she wants to address, but we hear what you say. Let's let Emily go forward if we can. Go ahead.
You want me to continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Just for the record, I'm not suggesting and never have 30% AMI, Rich. The other parts of the affordability recommendations, which I'll just outline and we can continue on. I'd like to, I recommend that you have something, and this is sort of goes without saying, but probably should be said, that requires best efforts of the Housing Authority to renew the project-based voucher contract if it's offered on the same comparable terms throughout the life of the project. That seems to make sense. And then I recommend that there be a special restriction with respect to the replacement public housing units that requires them to continue to be operated at rents affordable to households that are eligible for state public housing. And now in this case, it's actually up to 80% currently for state public housing, but at affordable rents, which means at 30% of their income, or to follow the requirements of any equivalent project-based voucher subsidy program that's being used. It sounds like we don't want to talk about this anymore tonight, but I'm happy to have future discussions about it. I recommended that you use a loan structure. I'm hearing that it's been decided you don't want to do that. You want me to just move on?
Yes, please.
Okay. We've had this discussion before. Now these things are sort of tangential to this funding, but we're talking about the pre-development funds that were already approved. I'm suggesting that we stipulate that the previously funded pre-development grant expenditures be deferred until after the ARPA funds have been expended, or the planning board has approved the site plan, whichever comes later. And so the planning board, I assume, is expected to approve the site plan as soon as the zoning change takes place. That's my understanding. So that would be just a way of putting a little less risk on the CPC to make sure that the project is a little further along and has that little extra amount of security of having all the zoning in place, as well as the other funds expended, which I believe NHA has already agreed to do.
Okay,
You want me to go on?
please.
Yeah. And this speaks to the discussions we've had before about NHA using its best efforts to include a substantial number of family units in the next phase of the project, since it's not gonna happen in this one. And there's been indication from somebody that some discussion about this has already occurred, I believe. I don't know with which board, perhaps with the planning board.
Jean, do you know about?
Do you know that, Gene?
I'm sorry.
Whether they've discussed,
Family units?
family units in phase two?
Yes, the housing authority did not want to have a limitation in the zoning that said it could only be for persons over a certain age or handicapped persons. Wanted to have that not be in the zoning so that it was possible, perhaps at some later time. I mean, the project that's being developed right now is for elderly and handicapped, but so that at some future time, there might be some possibility of having family housing. And I think part of the reason that was given for not having that restriction in the zoning was that it might help with getting the state funding. The state would prefer to see the zoning be such that it would allow families at some time.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right, so this would go a little further. It would really put the burden on NHA to use best efforts to not only have the zoning be appropriate, but to also have their proposal for the next phase include family units. That's what the state really wants to see. Not just the zoning, but the actual units.
Okay.
And then the last thing speaks to this dilemma about how to think about this, the Seabeds Cook project. And I was suggesting that we put, it's really not so much a time limit as a right to reconsider. I don't know, to me, it seems like there's a little difference there. But to say that if there hasn't been any type of funding award from HLC, and that could include public as well as the private housing funding by a certain date, and I'm suggesting June 2026, which gives us 2 rounds to go, that you would have the right to reconsider the award. And that's just, again, because of this, the problem with the 2 projects, which makes it extra difficult to predict the funding.
Okay. Reg, something to add?
Mute.
Reg Foster.
Yeah, mute, sorry. Just wanted to ask Emily if you were aware of the overall plan that we're working towards, where we have 25 acres of land with 60 one-bedroom World War II units, High Rock Estates. And the plan is right after we finish doing phase 1 of Linden Chambers, we're probably going to be moving to reposition that federal property and build 120 or 100 more family units. And so how would it make sense to put a restriction on Chambers when we already have that as part of our plan to add family units in an adjacent 25-acre property?
Adjacent to this
Linden
one or
Chambers.
somewhere else?
Yeah, adjacent to this
This
one.
is adjacent to. So what's the sequence? What's the proposed sequencing of that?
Well, we can
Which
let
would-
you know, but it happening after the, obviously we can't do it at the same time, but the plan is after we finish phase 1A and 1B of Linden Street, we probably once we start construction of at least phase 1B, if not earlier, we'll put in our repositioning application for redeveloping High Rock. And we already did phase 1, as you know. I think that we took 20 of those, and turned it into 20 duplexes. So the town already supports that approach, and I don't think we need a restriction on Chambers Street for family housing when we already have a site that's like literally adjacent that is more suitable for it.
So would that happen before phase 2 of this
I don't
property?
know. I don't know. You know, it depends on where the money is. We know that there is money for the repositioning and there's not money, you know, readily available for phase 2 of Chambers. So yeah, the likelihood is yes, but it's a very speculative yes. I'm answering to a speculative question here.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that, and I don't actually know what you mean by repositioning it. Maybe there could be some more information about what the plan is, or maybe it's just me that doesn't know about the plan for the High Rock, what you're calling repositioning. What does that mean? That there is funding from,
We're
So-
going to do section 18, RAD section 18 blend repositioning of High Rock. And basically move over to the section 8 program and use the money to redevelop, tear down all those units and redevelop them. I mean, in a sentence, obviously there's a lot more to it.
so it doesn't need state money, or it does?
It's not a state property. It's a federally subsidized property already.
But will it need state funding to proceed, tax
Well, it
credits?
needs the
tax credits?
same tax credits,
all
and
the
et cetera.
same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the same. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Okay.
if that, yeah, maybe we could get some more information on that. That would be
Sure.
helpful.
I think, any other questions from the committee? Emily, thank you. I think there'll be some follow-up from our end on, some of the things that have come out tonight. But I think that's all we need you for at this time. Is that
Okay.
fair to say? Laura, you okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Joe, may I ask, do we want to address the question from the finance committee?
Yeah, yes, you have it.
Everybody's here. One of the questions we received at the finance committee consultation had to do with the CHA's developer fee. And the fact that the CPC provided the previous grant, the 1.386 million, and that's being used to pay pre-development costs. If I understood it correctly, if CHA is receiving a developer fee now through those pre-development funds, but then also getting a developer fee once this project proceeds and moves forward, does it constitute kind of a double dipping, so to speak, in terms of the money that they're receiving as the developer on this project?
Are you asking me?
Well,
Anyone that knows the answer, I guess.
I mean, well, my comment would just be, and I think somebody from CHA has to speak to this. My understanding is the fee that was funded from the pre-development monies was a consulting fee for CHA in its role as consultant before being selected. I don't know if they actually have been selected yet as a developer. So it was a consulting fee for pre-development work. And then the developer fee, which is the developer's right under the HLC rules, is a formula. I'm not sure who's getting that or how it's being divided up between NHA and CHA. I mean, they would have to speak to that.
Reggie's hand is raised.
Yeah. Reg, do you have an answer to that?
Yes, I do. CHA is not getting a developer fee. That's a specialized term. They're serving as a consultant, as Emily says. So, they have hourly workers, they put so many hours in, they send us monthly invoices and so forth as a consultant. We are in negotiations with them as to be our developer. They're in the early stages right now, and I'm obviously not going to speak to specific details of negotiation, but as Emily says, the developer is entitled to a fee that isn't so many hours at such and so an hourly rate, but it's just a fee for doing the development. It's and And that is a subject of negotiation and how much that gets split between NHA and CHA. But it's not a double dip of any kind whatsoever.
So one was a pre-development consulting fee, and the next one will be a developer fee, is that right?
Yeah, but the word fee, is really two different kinds of fees there. A developer fee, for example, when I'll just use High Rock Homes as an example. When we did High Rock Homes in 2005 to 2008, there was a developer fee, of which NHA received about $650,000. It's just a cash fee, and it's part of the incentive of doing the work to the developer, which back then, as today, is a combination of both NHA and the developer. That was Peter Smith, I think, was the developer back then. And it's a different kind of animal altogether. It's not double dipping whatsoever. Whereas, it's time and materials in terms of the consulting that CHA has been doing for us since they started in mid-2021.
Not getting the same fee for not getting two fees for doing the same work?
No, that has nothing to do with each other.
Okay, all right. Anything else, Laura?
No,
No.
thanks.
Okay, Emily, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Appreciate it.
We will be in touch. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. All right, moving on in the agenda. Anything to add to the high school tennis court project? Liaison, any update, anything to add? It was a project that was well received by the finance committee.
Except for the possibility of losing the Frisbee.
Well, where's
Space.
the ultimate Frisbee field going to
That
go?
was the
But
question. Where's the ultimate Frisbee?
yeah. The word maintenance came up during the discussion.
Yeah.
I think they're concerned, as we are, that we don't just have the construction completed and then walk away from it. There's got to be some sort of a maintenance agreement there. It'll be into their budget, which Stacy assured us that it would be. Dave,
I'd like to point out that the concrete option that they chose to go with has much less
Maintenance.
maintenance.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the court, I said this last time.
Yeah.
You look at every one of the courts, they have cracks in them and they're not being maintained.
Yeah.
And so presumably the concrete is not gonna crack like that.
right,
And the chair was,
So I think it's a wise decision to go with. concrete.
she just said, be careful of your wording
In the warrant.
in the warrant.
yeah.
But a lot of that seems to me to be on Park and Rec.
I think so. Is that right, Celia?
Yeah,
Well, the
We'll
warrant
draft
article
it.
wording is ours.
Yeah, we get a draft and then we can workshop it if we wish.
okay.
And I wanna say historically, I think last year we may have pulled it up. At the end of right before the warrant had to go to print, so we could get some last minute edits in along with our, recommendations. But yeah, no, we can make sure that that's an easy request.
And the reason why she wanted it clear is because,
Can't use CPA
can't use
funds
the
for
CPA
maintenance.
funds.
Yeah, and we're completely demoing and redoing those, so it's not maintenance, so I think we're good.
All right, the DeFazio fencing improvement project. No questions at all. I think, Jim Healy was the only one that said, so it's new fencing. They're not
Adding.
adding, right? That went through nicely. Okay, we'll discuss the consultation with the finance committee, public hearing planning. We know our responsibilities, right? If you're a liaison, you probably, or you will be expected to introduce your presenter. And I'm sure you must know who that's gonna be by now. Laura, excuse me, will you be the one to just open up the evening?
Yeah, right?
I think,
Or-
the way it works is we would open up a meeting. Then
Yeah.
to open up the meeting, you would the chair's introduction. And then I think, a liaison for each project will kind of do a little introduction of the project and introduce the applicant. All of the applicants are available and are planning to attend, and they will kind of give the presentation to the community.
Yeah, I looked at Peter's and some before.
Yeah.
Still, okay. Yeah, and the first one, do we want to start with Linden Chambers?
What's the wisdom there? Would we rather go with the easiers?
I'm thinking Linden Chambers first, just because if it's at the end, I think.
Well, number wise, it's the first one, right?
Yeah.
2025
Everybody that's gonna be attend this hearing are gonna,
They're there for that one.
they're
Yeah.
gonna be in support of it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I don't think that would be a long discussion, you know.
Well, it's FY 2025-01, so go with that first.
Okay, so then that would be me introducing Reg.
Right. Okay,
So we just do them in the order of the numbers.
yep,
Do you want to decide tonight who will introduce the tennis courts and who will do?
Yeah, that would be good. Joe's not gonna be here.
right,
Oh, Joe's not gonna be here.
no,
Yeah, well, I can talk about the fencing if you want me to, and introduce the, town staff that will.
yeah, Ed
represent it.
Olson, maybe, Ed Olson will probably be,
It-
He's speaking to it?
Ed Olson.
okay?
Yeah, so we just present them and they make their presentation. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, so O1 is LWD, O2, who's gonna do tennis courts?
I can do the intro, and Reg is already gonna be doing their presentation on NHA, because Reg and I are both liaisons to the tennis courts. So, I don't know, either way, it's fine, you can
Is
do
that
that.
all right with you, Reg?
It's fine with me, we worked, we were joined at the hip anyway, so.
And who will be the applicant? Be Stacy?
Stacy.
Yeah,
Stacy,
yeah.
and fencing is Ed?
Mhm. Correct, and they've all confirmed with me that they are available.
And this is.
13th.
13.
Yes, also Needham TV will be broadcasting the hearing. So they'll be in attendance in the room.
Will there be hair and makeup?
Glam, you know, glam.
Which, is it gonna be back at,
Oh, yeah.
It will be back at
Okay.
PSAB. We've only been here to accommodate the meetings with FinCom.
Okay.
And, also, the legal notice has been drafted and sent out to Hometown Weekly and will be published in the next two editions. So it'll be next week and the following week, the 29th, and then
Okay.
is it the 6th or the 7th? Whatever day of the week it comes out. So that's all set. We will also put an announcement in the town newsletter. So it's been drafted. We're just gonna give it a final read and then submit that as well.
So that's the 13th of March, and the plan then would be that we would,
And then I think also the NHA was doing their postcard mailing, and they were also listing our public hearing on that postcard.
Yeah.
Um,
and then we'll meet the,
sorry.
you know, that we'll meet the week after that, the 20th, and take our vote on the projects, correct? Formal vote.
When is the select board hearing? The consult?
The what? Public hearing?
Tuesday.
Select board.
Yeah, the 27th.
Next Tuesday.
And you're not
Reg-
here for that either.
It's the same memo that we gave to Josh.
We think?
Yes, I think we'll just maybe tweak it a little bit, add a little more information in about the reserves, where the money's coming from, and we'll send the same one off too.
Okay.
And that was included in the meeting packet tonight, the memo that went to the finance committee. So we're gonna send a similar memo to the select board in advance of the consultation next week.
Okay.
Do you think, I should have Dave come with me to the select board? Consult, since Joe won't be
He's
there
always there.
this day,
Oh, this day.
or no?
You, that's
We'll
you,
talk.
you can ask him, yeah,
Hey, I'm available.
good.
Okay.
Anything else? Approve the minutes, we don't have them, do we, or do we?
No, I'm sorry.
Nope,
we
that's
don't
quite
have
all right.
tonight.
Quite all right. Anything else you want to add here that's not on the agenda? Okay, we're getting to the end of the road here, the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess.
I don't know. That's all.
All right, hearing nothing, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Let's do a roll call vote. Dave,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Keith? Aye. Jean,
Aye.
Laura,
Aye.
Reg,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye as well.
Thank
We are adjourned. Did I miss?
Yep.
Nope.
Same
Okay.
thing.
Thank you, everybody.
I did have a question. Do we have to do those videos?
What about
like we
Jim?
Did last time? Remember we did-
Jim, are you there?
Yep, aye.
I'm sorry. You're in complete darkness there. We barely can see you.
Because we didn't do that
It's
last
mo-
year.
No.
Yeah, no, I
it's-
think that was a
I'm in my
COVID
car
thing.
and it,
You're in your car?
Oh,
I'm in-
hi,
well,
Jim.
it's got great video and I can hear
Okay.
great.
It's probably a tough.
Thank you. Sorry to,
Good night.
No problem.
Bye, Reg. Bye, Jim.
Aye. Have a nice evening.
Enjoy vacation, Reg.
Yeah, enjoy.